Welcome. Today, we're diving into an explainer on one of the most profound, deeply ingrained drives of the human condition, our fundamental need for structure. It's a journey that's going to take us all the way from the dawn of human tribal rituals, right down into the microscopic firing of neurons inside our own brains, and finally out into the rapid, sweeping shifts of our modern, secularized world. We're looking closely at exactly how belief, society, and the human mind intersect to literally construct the reality we walk through every single day.
Are we merely floating in an infinite, anonymous chaos? It's kind of that cold, quiet question that creeps up on us in the middle of the night, isn't it? Objectively speaking, reality is just this vast, overflowing sea of disorderly arrangements. It's an infinite chaos of objects and events with absolutely no inherent connection. And yet, our minds fundamentally reject that. We literally cannot live in the void. We're completely driven to draw lines, to find patterns, and to build an architecture of meaning to keep us afloat.
The sociologist Peter L. Berger captured this existential tension perfectly. He wrote, "The nomos is a patch of ordered light in a chartless dark sea of chaos." It's such a beautiful, highly evocative metaphor. We look out into the dark sea of existence, and honestly, just to survive it, to keep ourselves from drowning in all that unpredictability, we absolutely have to build our own patch of light. And that light is exactly what Berger calls the nomos. Now, a nomos isn't some undeniable physical law of the universe. It's a human-constructed social order. Think of it as a shield of meaning that we hold up to defend against the absolute terror of anomie, which is basically meaninglessness. Sociologically speaking, we invent this order because our minds fundamentally crave coherence over ambiguity. We need to believe that the world makes sense, and historically, humans have splashed this need onto the broadest cosmic canvas we can find.
Part 1. Weaving the social fabric. Durkheim and order. Let's zoom in on how these shared beliefs actually build and bind our communities together.
Okay, let's dive into this. The foundational sociologist Emile Durkheim gave us a really brilliant mechanism for understanding exactly how social order is manufactured from the ground up. It starts with ritual practice, literally just people physically gathering together. This leads directly to a shared emotional experience, which in turn reinforces a collective conscience. And finally, all of this produces deep, enduring social solidarity. It's this continuous cycle of belonging. Durkheim essentially argued that religion isn't just a set of abstract ideas. It's a very physical, biological, and social necessity for maintaining order. And the real engine driving this whole process is what Durkheim famously called collective effervescence. Basically, when humans group together for a collective ritual, their emotions, their energy, their intentions, they are physically amplified. This shared emotional energy acts as the invisible moral glue for human tribes. It instills grit, it enforces community norms, and it makes the individual feel like they're an integral part of something vastly larger than themselves. Taking a strictly impartial anthropological lens here, we can actually see that this shared faith acts as a highly effective evolutionary survival tool. Having belief in a moralizing God establishes these strong, inviolable rules and a sense of divine surveillance. And that actually solves massive cooperation challenges in really large groups. It creates what anthropologists call fictive kinship, where you end up treating complete strangers like family. In fact, empirical studies show that, historically, religious groups endure more than 4 times longer than secular groups, entirely because of this incredibly tight cooperative bonding. But, sociology offers a few varying perspectives on the longevity of this whole phenomenon. While Durkheim focused heavily on religion as the enduring, fundamental source of social cohesion, the eternal glue, so to speak, his contemporary, Max Weber, saw a very different trajectory. Weber recognized religion's massive influence, but theorized that its magical, mystical elements would inevitably diminish over time as societies became more complex and rationalized. We'll explore Weber's fascinating prediction in just a bit, but first, we really need to look inward. Part 2. Anchors Against Anxiety, the Neuroscience of Faith. We're going to zoom right into the individual human psyche now to explore how faith literally alters our neurobiology. The neuroscience of belief is a rapidly expanding and, honestly, a truly captivating field. Researchers have essentially found that religious belief acts as a literal psychological buffer against existential anxiety. In many ways, attachment to a divine figure functions neurologically much like having a secure parental attachment. So, when our sense of meaning is threatened by tragedy or just sheer randomness, this belief restores our cognitive alignment. Astonishingly, it literally lowers distress signals in the brain, specifically something called error-related negativity, or ERN. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the clear visual data mapping this exact phenomenon. You can see the direct inverse relationship between deep faith and neural distress. As self-reported religiosity goes up, the physical markers of subconscious anxiety, like that startle blink reflex and the actual amplitude of the ERN distress signal, measurably go down. It's wild. The brain of a deep believer genuinely reacts to errors and uncertainty with significantly less neurological panic. And the really essential ingredient here seems to be the very concept of order itself. Studies have shown that simply priming the human mind with the concept of a master plan significantly reduces neurological distress. What's even more fascinating about this is that the order doesn't even need to be fully understandable to the individual. Just believing that a hidden, maybe incomprehensible order exists out there somewhere literally physically calms the brain's error detection systems. To summarize this profound psychological need, researchers noted, religion provides confidence in the orderliness of one's environment, acting as a bulwark against anxiety-producing uncertainty. We just desperately need a shield against an unpredictable universe. And for the vast majority of human history, that shield has overwhelmingly been the sacred. Part 3, the Age of Disenchantment, the modern era. Now, let's pull back out to the macro-historical level to examine how the modern era disrupts these ancient coping mechanisms. So what happens when that ancient shield fractures? Well, this brings us right back to Max Weber. He mapped out this chronological path of rationalization. Basically, humanity started in an enchanted world, which was driven by magic, mystery, and divine intervention. From there, we slowly developed a scientific worldview, seeking logical explanations for phenomena. This eventually built our modern rational society, which is governed by bureaucracy and formal rules. And ultimately, this all leads to what Weber famously called the iron cage of rationality and the gradual, inevitable fading of the mystical. Weber termed this shift disenchantment, or in German, Entzauberung. It's basically the objective process where mystical and religious worldviews are slowly replaced by rational, secular, and scientific frameworks. Simply put, science, medicine, and massive bureaucratic states are increasingly stepping in to replace divine intervention as our primary sources of order and explanation in the modern world. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why that shift happens. Pippa Norris and Ronald Inglehart proposed what they call the existential security theory. Just look at the stark contrast in these metrics. In highly secure societies, like Scandinavian countries that have incredibly strong social safety nets, welfare, and healthcare, systemic anxiety is remarkably low. Because of that, the societal need for religion as a psychological buffer drops significantly. Conversely, in vulnerable societies facing high existential threats like disease, poverty, or violence, the reliance on religion as a psychological anchor remains absolutely crucial. Which leads us to a truly fascinating modern demographic paradox. On one hand, you have wealthy, existentially secure nations rapidly becoming more secular, leaning heavily on science and bureaucracy for their sense of order. But simultaneously, because those vulnerable societies have significantly higher fertility rates, the global population as a whole is actually becoming more religious overall. It's wild to think about. The world is essentially splitting right along the lines of existential security. Now, for those living in highly modernized, secularized societies, this creates what Peter Berger called the plausibility crisis. Traditional churches basically collapse as the absolute reality definers for everyone. Believers often suddenly find themselves as cognitive minorities in this incredibly crowded, pluralistic marketplace of competing ideas. So to survive, many religious institutions have to adapt by leaning heavily into psychological self-help or even consumerist messaging, all while science continues its rise as the absolute dominant secular explanatory scheme. Part 4. A final thought. Reflections on meaning. As we enter our final philosophical reflection, let's just slow down and take this all in. As we've seen, the human brain is literally wired to reject chaos. We crave the light, and humanity will always splash its need for meaning onto the broadest cosmic canvas we can find, striving to make sense of the chaos together. Whether that ordered light is generated through the sacred, shared effervescence of a religious ritual or through the incredibly rational, secular triumphs of the scientific method, the human effort to find the light in that dark sea, it persists. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. In an increasingly disenchanted, incredibly complex world, how will you construct your own patch of ordered light?